Right, well that saves me from doing the first part of my talk, which is to get up and get you to stretch and have a stand, so we won't do that one. I've had quite a rich life over the years. I've dealt with a lot of people, a lot of interesting things. Lived all over the world, born in the UK, lived in New Zealand, done a lot of work in Europe, and been living here since 2011, so a bit. One of the things that I've seen, and I've worked in a lot of companies, I've worked in defence electronics, I've worked in the gas industry, I've worked in insurance, I've worked in life insurance, done work on defence again, and obviously a lot of time in academic life. And I've had students who've worked for Ford, Coca-Cola, Nestle, Deutsche Bahn, all over the world, and small companies too. And I've done applied research with projects around marketing of gas barbecues in Canada. That was one of the more interesting ones. I've got a PhD student who's looking at why his crisis management teams don't follow the plan when a crisis hits. He was complaining to me about the ones in Greece. I can say that I'm married to a Greek. He was saying the ones in Greece, he said, all they do is they wander around and wave their hands in the air when something goes wrong. And I said, it's okay, they're Greek, don't worry about it. He's doing a really interesting project though, looking at why people go off script. And the point is that people struggle with challenge, and people struggle with change. And so do I, and so does everybody else. And it's really how you learn to overcome challenges, and how you and what you can do to be more resilient. Now, resilient is an overused word. Okay, it is an overused word. We talk about resilience a lot. It was all over the news this morning. I'm going to be reasonably precise as I go through in what I mean by resilience, and mine comes out of some quite strong psychological research that was done in the UK by a guy called Peter Clough. And what I enjoy doing, and you'll see, and I do this through exercises, I like to get people doing things. I think just sitting and being talked at is not a great thing to happen. I like to help people really to develop more resilience, and you see that. And I won't give you another example, but examples abound in sport, of course, but you also see organisations that do it well. This is another of my intellectual heroes, a guy called Albert Bandura. Albert must be about 83, 84 now. He's been doing this a long time. He's a social psychologist. Very, 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 very clever. I even understand some of his books. It's quite difficult to get into some of them. And he says it's all a matter of self-efficacy. How you struggle together with resilience to meet inevitable obstacles, inequities in life. Let's face it, things go wrong. Okay, it's as simple as that. Things go wrong. Yesterday afternoon, there I am, rushing to get out of the house, to get the Lego loaded into the car, and the dog decided to follow me out into the corridor. I turned around, looked at the dog, let the door go. I'm locked out. Things go wrong. Fortunately, my son works at a gym about 10 minutes up the road, so I'm able to ring him, and so that's why I was slightly late getting here yesterday. But things go wrong. Things that we don't plan for, and what you need to do is to help individuals to become more resilient, and then the organisations that they work in will become more resilient. That's why, because things go wrong, things change. What are some of the issues that we've got? Well, as I've just said, crises, minor crises getting locked out really, but crises and disaster, both man-made and natural, occur more frequently than we forecast for. I lived in Christchurch. I was actually in Sydney negotiating a new job contract when the first earthquake struck back in 2010. But I was at home for the second one. Nobody saw the second one coming, and it was the second one that did all of the damage. So things happen, badly. The other thing about change and being challenged is to do with personal relationships in organisations. And that is difficult relationships and politics and their management, we all know is difficult. Some of you work in organisations, I know, where you will work with people that you don't particularly like. Let's face it, it happens. That's just the way it is. But you've still got to work with them. And trust me, I used to work in universities. It's full of people who are difficult to work with, including me. I'm sure some people would say that. But it's full of people who are very difficult to work with because they've got very fixed ideas on life. But you've still got to work with them. So you've got to become more resilient in the way we deal with them. And the other thing is that everybody says, oh, change is, if I hear one more person say change is accelerating, I may scream, but it is. So things are changing quicker and quicker, mainly driven by these things, okay? Mainly driven by ICT. There's a lot of things going on in the world that are making change happen much more quickly. In terms of man-made and natural disasters occurring more frequently, they're a bit like Sydney buses. You'll wait about an hour for one and then 3 turn up altogether. That's not. I don't know what Wollongong's like, but that's certainly the case in Sydney. Example. Anybody got a Samsung mobile phone? Must be one in here. You remember they had a great. I think was it 2 years ago now. They had a great year a couple of years back. For some reason, their phones batteries started to blow up in flight, and they were promptly banned from all American airlines. I think it was more to do with the fact it was Samsung than anything else. So they said, okay, well, we better do something about that. We'll recall all of those. Fantastic. And we'll rush out a replacement. So they then those started exploding as well. So you've spent, I don't know how many millions of dollars replacing a set of handsets, and the replacements that you send out don't work as well. And then I know, because we were affected by this, I had this phone call one day, said, sir, we need to come and replace your washing machine. Who is Samsung? So you plan for crises, but then you get 2 mobile phone problems, and then you find out that your dishwashers are going alight. Sorry, washing machines are burning and getting alight. So you might think there's a bit of a problem. So basically, we do forecast that things are going to go wrong, but then things go wrong that you don't expect. My PhD student who works for Coca-Cola, he's had some of the most bizarre things that I've ever heard of happening in his factories. And they're going on all the time. It's not that they're a bad manufacturer, the same as everybody else. But things do happen that you're not predicting. Let's just talk a minute about managing difficult relationships and politics. Again, this would be a week or 2 weeks of talks in a postgraduate program, so we're condensing it into a few minutes. But if you think about it, the way that you've got to manage those sort of relationships, manage the sort of politics, is through having fairly powerful conversations. You've got to converse. It's no good going back into your shell. You've got to work out what's going on. You've got to be very aware of the situation you're in. Very aware. You've got to understand what the context is that you have in the conversation in. You've got to get over yourself. And that's the first thing. So I was very lucky. I did the Harvard program on negotiation, and the first thing they said is you have to take the personalities out of the room. Otherwise, you won't get anything done. You've got to remove yourself. You've got to say, it's no good playing the power games that we play in difficult conversations. Even if the other person is, it's far better that you listen from a neutral perspective. You've got to be mindful. You've got to be there. You've got to be in the conversation, not thinking about other things. You've got to concentrate on what it is you're doing. You really have to be very careful about how you're situated. You've got to engage. It's one of my character faults is I don't enjoy sometimes engaging with some people. And I know that I have to work on that. And you have to build confidence in working with that. But you do need to listen to what your inner radar is telling you. What at the same time, you've got to listen to what is going on from the perspective that you've got. What is my instinct telling me? Instincts. Sometimes you've got to break instincts, and sometimes you can be wrong. And if the facts that get presented to you, change your opinion, fine. But you've got to listen to that inner voice. What's it telling you? You have to understand that there are consequences in whatever you do. So I had an incident, a place that I worked at. I'd got an employee who I was directly responsible for, who'd done some fairly unsavoury things, or alleged that he'd done some unsavoury things. And so I suspended him. I sent him home. And someone said to me, he's in a really bad way, do you know that? And I said, yes, but we've put in place all of the things that we need to put in place to protect his mental health. But I can't move away from the fact that we've had some serious allegations about him. So you've got to understand that there are consequences for what we do. And then the most important thing of all, shut up and listen deeply, because that's the way you're going to get. You remember the slide about the communication? Okay. Now, Alan's going to do some really fascinating stuff with this afternoon. I've had enough conversations with him, and I think what he's going to talk to you about, I think is really interesting. I wish I could stay for the afternoon. I'm certainly going to find out more about it. But there's all the non-verbal signals as well as what's being said to you that are most important. You've got to weigh those up and try and work out what is going on. So shut up and listen, but don't just listen with the... I refer to these things on the side of your head. They're the most underutilised management instrument in the world. But you've got to listen, but you've got to listen with your eyes as well. You've got to try and pick up the cues as to what is going on. So managing the politics, managing the difficult relationships is a real issue. And then we talk about the volume and pace of change. Now the problem that we've got when we get to that, this is the highlight of my day, by the way, sniffing the pen. It's marvellous. It's actually clearing my sinuses. It's very good for me. So, what you've got is you've got the volume and the pace of change, low, high. And then you've got the organisation's capacity to deal with it, high and low. Okay? Now what happens is it's an inverse relationship. What happens is over time, as it gets more and more, as you get more and more and more, your ability to deal with it declines unless you're pushing in more resources, of course. But what happens, you'll get to what we call an inflection point, whereby you actually can't cope with the volume and the pace of change that's going on, and the performance drops off. Okay, so that's a very important principle just there. The performance drops off. It's a bit like another athletic metaphor. It's a bit like hitting the wall when you run. Okay, you can only cope with so much volume and pace. You hit the wall and you suddenly slow down. That was my experience. I've had the, well, some people say the experience, certainly I'd say sometimes the misfortune to have restructured 3 entities. I restructured one twice because we didn't go far enough the first time. And after the second one, I hit the wall. My boss said, "We need to do another one." And I said, "Not me. I can't do it. I didn't have the performance." So we need to understand that in change there are these sort of ideas. I didn't have sufficient resilience to actually cope with that. So what you end up with is organisations that aren't resilient tend to have performance problems. It's a little bit like a new apprentice being told, "Okay, go and build a house." Okay, and it's day 1 of the apprenticeship and he's just bought his new tools. Now, if you're not resilient, you're going to have performance problems. The best example that I know of this, does everybody remember Blockbuster? Blockbuster, the video company? Remember? Some of you will, some of you won't. Well, they were a video and game rental company. 1985. 2004, they employed 84,000 people worldwide and had 9,000 stores. Big organisation. In Netflix, everybody's heard of Netflix? In 2000, they approached Blockbuster and said, "We'd like to sell ourselves to you for $50 million. The Blockbuster CEO said, "Oh, I don't think so. I think digital's going to be quite a niche business." Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy in 2010, And at the end of 2017, Netflix had 103, nearly 104 million subscribers worldwide and revenues of 8.8 billion US dollars. So if you ain't resilient, you're going to have performance problems. That's not having the foresight or the flexibility to see ahead. So what this gives you again is this idea of you will get organisational resilience actually has measured effects. This is work done by colleagues in America, Pratima Bansal. Financial volatility is an inverse relationship on this chart. I'm being a bit lazy. But basically what it says is that if you are a resilient organisation, you will have lower financial volatility, you will have higher sales growth, and you will have higher chances of survival over 15 years. And that's been proven. So that is a social scientist who sat down and actually said, does this actually work? Yes, it does. Now, the other side benefit, and it relates very obviously, these two things are interrelated, relates back to what I talked about this morning, in that it enables managers and employees, they get to see the bigger picture. They get to establish appropriate priorities. They get this idea of fighting the victim mentality. Well, it's got to happen to me. That's the disengagement coming through. So there's a constant theme in these sorts of ideas. It enables people to find their power. So it's not quite a year. August last year, I thought, I've had enough of this. I don't want to spend 3 hours a day in the car driving to Sydney to work with people I don't particularly like in some cases. Some I did. A job that I'm not enjoying, and I'm simply not fulfilling my purpose. Rome's nodding. He'll be smiling in a moment. And so I said, okay, well, what can I do? I had a long conversation with my boss and said, and we agreed, and he's helped me out. But I couldn't have done that if I hadn't been a reasonably resilient person. You've got to have a form of resilience. So you've got to respond and adapt to circumstances. You've got to learn, and that enables you to become much more competitive. So what does a resilient organisation look like? Well, a resilient organisation looks something like this. Now, what I've done here is to take two different but related concepts. So we've got a pointer on this. Let's have a look. A pointer. Oh, look at that pointer. Never give an old man a laser. You'll never know what you're going to do with it. What you've got around here is what, believe it or not, there is a job that's called being an organisational theorist. Basically, you look at organisations and conjure up theories about them. But what the organisation theorists tell us, having looked at things like aircraft carriers, firefighters, nuclear submarines, I was saying to somebody this morning, fancy doing an observational research study on a nuclear submarine. That'd be interesting. You couldn't pay me enough money to lock me in a tube and go underwater. But what they say is that resilient organisations have strong situational awareness, have strong operational awareness. They embrace complexity. We all know that things are becoming more complex for us at different levels, and they also celebrate expertise. At the same time, at the individual level, and this is an individual construct from psychology, they're committed to resilience. And what resilience means is that they know about challenge, they know about commitment, they know about control, and they know about confidence. So let's just talk a little bit about what those are. This one you've seen before. I'm not going to go through that at any length, but this is the environment. These are the worlds that we live in. And these rather strange German words are from a long-dead German philosopher, so, in case you're at all interested. But that's basically the context that we all work in.
What's the difference? I mean, there's no opposite ends. What's the difference in an ideal world and what you shoot for? What's the difference in the private world?
So the private world, that's a very, very good question. The private world is what you construct for yourself. The ideal world is when you take the private world out through the other three and you want to change the other three. So your private world is your view of you, and the ideal world is your view of all of the others brought together. That's why it's called a strange loop, is the expression that psychologists use. By the way, that's another thing that probably take a 4-hour lecture to discuss it at length. Oh, look at this. Did you see my lovely assistant sneak in with a cup of coffee? Thank you. Situational awareness. What is situational awareness? Situational awareness is what we all do when we drive. Some people in Sydney don't have situational awareness when they drive, but we all should have situational awareness when we drive. And basically, we perceive things that we see. We do a thing called cue-based decision making. We perceive things are going on. We comprehend a particular view of the world, and then we project what are going to be the consequences of having that particular view. We make a decision, and then we take an action, and we get feedback through the context as to what is going on. So situational awareness is just how we're located in our context. What's our view of the world? And different people have different levels of situational awareness. Fighter pilots, for example, have tremendous situational awareness. They have to have, that's what they do. They're able to reconcile lots and lots of very rapid, very dynamic inputs. So they're constantly working out what's going on in the world. They're comprehending it. They're projecting. They're taking actions. There's another school of philosophy that takes it back even further than that, but that is essentially what we do. That's how we make decisions. The psychologists call it naturalistic decision making. Most people do not work through a very logical process in decision making. Most people make decisions by looking at something and going, yeah, that's happening, okay, I'll do that. So we're very rapid. There's a great book by Daniel Kahneman called Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow, where he contrasts the two types of decision making that we actually do. That's a book I'd strongly recommend that you read. He also happens to have won a Nobel Prize. Operational awareness. I struggled with how to explain this to people, and then I suddenly realised what it was when I wanted to put it forward. Has anybody come across the business model canvas before? Yeah? Yeah? It's a tremendous analytical tool. It came out of the PhD thesis from I think it's one of the French or the Swiss business schools. There's a book called Business Model, I think. I'd have to look it up for you. And that's where this is drawn from. But it's really neat because what it does is it takes this idea of design thinking. People familiar with that expression? Some of you will have heard of it. This idea of deliberately designing outcomes and projects. And it links it up to business strategy, which is my old school. Business strategy really hadn't moved it hadn't moved theoretically or in practice for about probably 40 years. And then this came out. By the way, if you type in business model canvas in Google, Mr. Google answers everything. You'll find that's actually a PNG file, and you can actually and they don't copyright it. You can actually use it to ask the questions. What the business model canvas does in terms of helping you to understand what's going on with your operations is it asks a series of questions. Now, I know you can't read the questions on on that particular version. Remind me, Steve, and I'll leave you this copy, and you can just distribute it. Yep, all right. But what it does is it asks a series of questions around what your value propositions are. Does everybody know when I talk about value proposition? Anybody not know? Value prop, come on, you be honest. The bundle of services or products that you're offering to different customers. It asks questions around your value propositions. It asks questions around your customer relationships, around the channels that you're operating in, and in terms of your customer segments. Fairly conventional, but it's the way it's put together that is neat. So what that then enables you to do is to actually have a look at your revenue streams. So you can begin to question your revenue streams based on what those customer-related activities are. It then asks questions, or you can ask questions about your key activities, your key resources, and your key partners in your activities, the way your business is running, which then tells you about your cost structure. Now the idea is, and where this actually comes out, some of this it actually relates to, is it then does, has anybody heard of Blue Ocean Strategy? I can never pronounce the name, Morbogon and Chan. It's a thing called Blue Ocean Strategy. And the aim of this is to enable you to do, is to balance what you offer, your value propositions, with your costs. And what you end up with in the middle is what they call value innovation. Because what you're doing is you're actually balancing out all of the things that you do for your customers with all of the things that enable you to do what you do for your customers. So you're actually able to innovate with value propositions that work really well, but without blowing your costs out. And that's the idea of being operationally aware, that your operations are actually fitting with what is going on in your environment. Now that's the sort of, I mean, that's the sort of thing that I run as workshops, or I wouldn't say all the time, but I've done it a number of times. And it helps to think through. And a good facilitator, somebody like Steve or Jerome, can actually drive you through these sorts of ideas quite straightforwardly. So that's operational awareness. All right? Value innovation. If you type into Mr. Google, or Dr. Google I should call it, if you type value innovation into Dr. Google, it'll pop up. I'll show you the book. We need to embrace complexity. What do I mean by that? Fancy words and so on and so forth. Basically, when you get to my age in particular, you realise that there's all sorts of information coming at you all the time. Now you can either drown in it, or you can basically start to rationalise it and say, I just accept what I need to. You've got to work out what it is you need to work with it, but you've just got to accept that there's more and more and more and more information coming through, and that you need to just accept it and work with it. That's what I mean by embracing complexity. No more than that. I don't expect you to go off and read books on complexity theory unless you're having trouble sleeping. But that's the idea, is you accept all of these inputs that are going on. You've got to celebrate expertise. What I mean by that is that everybody in this room is clever, all right? We're just clever in different ways. Okay? We've all got different skill sets. We've all got different mindsets. We all do things differently. We've all got our own pet hates and so on. And celebrate it. I'll say one thing I've noticed, and it's not just Australia, it's worldwide. There's a habit of people knocking people who are sort of experts. Which worries me a little bit in some cases. But celebrate expertise. You know, the idea of training, again, another person I was linked to last night was talking about the importance of training in their organisation. Absolutely right. I mean, one of the reasons I came down here was because people have expressed an interest in learning stuff. Okay, and if you learn one thing out of what I've done in either of the talks this morning and the exercises that we're going to do, and we've got another one coming up, you're developing your expertise. You're celebrating that expertise, looking for the best people. Being the best that you can be as well is particularly important. Getting above the line. That's a that was the single most important concept of yesterday, is how do you get above the line? Very important. And then there's this idea of commitment to resilience. Now, this is a very strong, very well-researched concept, and I'll explain how we can go looking at it and understand it. But what it means is this is, in terms of control, control is split. This is by the work by a guy called Peter Clough, is his name. He's a professor of psychology at Manchester Metropolitan University. When we talk about control, we talk about life control, and that is the extent to which we believe that we shape what happens to us. That's Viktor Frankl's work. If you've never read Viktor Frankl's work, Man's Search for Meaning, go and buy a copy and read it. Okay? It is one of the most important books ever written. Viktor Frankl. His name is, whoops. I'm going to work out opening these pens, Steve. Viktor Frankl. It's not an easy read. It's about his experience of being in the concentration camps. But it explains how he came to the conclusion that he chooses how he reacts to what happens to him. Now, his is a dreadful story. So that's very important. And then there's emotional control. And that's, are we above or below the line? I wrote this before, Jerome said that yesterday. I wrote this before then. Very important to say that. It's, are we above or below the line? And that's also I got you to do the gratitude exercise this morning to work out where you are. Because expressing gratitude, guess what? It takes you above the line. It lifts you. And that's what it should do. In terms of commitment, are you goal-oriented towards planning? Or are you achievement-oriented towards execution? We're all different. I'm a planner. Right? I'm a planner. I'm really pleased when I execute something, but I'm a planner. I mean, I'm this sort of person who carries these things around with me. This is my monthly planner, and it's got my annual plan. It's got my monthly plan. It's got my weekly plan. Sorry, where's it gone? No, I've missed one. It's got my quarterly plan. It's got my monthly plan. It's got my weekly plan. It's got my day plan, and it's all color coded. Yes, I'm a tragic. I know. Someone said to me, you carry a pencil case around. I said, well, where else would I put my highlighters? So there you go. But I'm a planner, so that's what I do. And I even execute sometimes as well, as my dear wife reminds me when she's asking me about what invoices I've done this week. So your challenge, do you have a risk orientation? Do you want to stretch yourself? How risk oriented are you? It's also about your learning orientation. Do you simply adapt to a circumstance? You know, oh, I could do with losing a couple of kilos. Or do you actually want to generate some meaningful, and yes, I could do with losing a couple of kilos. Or do you want to genuinely generate frame-breaking change? Yeah, I need to lose 30 kilos. There's a difference between 2 and 30. Okay, so that's what Peter Senge calls generative change. It's about changing your actual approach, really shifting your frame of reference. And then, of course, there's confidence. Confidence in abilities, which is self-belief, in our capacity for success. Or interpersonal confidence. How comfortable are we at working, at interacting with others? Now, in this room, observing last night's dinner, a lot of people who've got very good interpersonal confidence. Very good indeed. There's also a lot of goal-oriented individuals. So that's the idea of organisational resilience. So, let's test it out. So, same groups. If you weren't in a group before, you can find a group before. Now, this time, I want a reporter. And yes, I was asked earlier, can the reporter join in the design? Of course you can. But I just need someone to observe what's going on in the groups. But this time, I want a lead designer, okay, to be nominated. And I want an employee representative to be nominated. You will see why as we work through the exercise. So, sort yourself out into groups. Now this time, the first exercise is to make an animal, either a dog or a fish. If you don't want to make a dog or a fish, you can make something else. But make an animal. And then the animal's got to be incorporated into a tower. And you've heard the rest. Tallest tower wins. Maybe. So, get your groups together and then we'll start the timer. Are we in? Are we in the groups? We got our designated leaders. Designated leaders? Designated leaders, put your hands up. Have we worked out who? Come on, hurry up. You're the designated. Who's the designated leader on this table? Who's the designated leader? Designer, sorry, lead designer. Lead designer. Who's the employee rep? Employee rep? As long as you know when I ask. And lead designer? Employee rep? Yeah? Right? Are we ready? Are we set? Go, you got 15 minutes. Coffee. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, time! Hands off. Hands off. Hands off. Sit down. Yeah, well, just sit at the table that you've been building at and then we'll take it from there. Let's have a look. So, what's the animal? Fish. Where's the fish? At the bottom. Very interesting. And the animal here is the frog. The frog's blocking the bridge. I did say any animal. Not say any animal. Some of you might not have picked that up. Apologies for that. And that's a fish. It's a deep sea fish. It's a deep sea fish, in which case it's struggling because it's out of the water. He jumped. The winners. Back to your seats. And if you could pop the Lego back in, that'd be really good. Just can you try and make sure all the pieces are in the box? That'd be really nice. Thank you. So, this is the therapeutic bit, by the way, getting the Lego back in the box. That's the Okay, where are my reporters? Where are my reporters? Would you like to start, sir? What sort of things did you notice?
Well, I thought this time we were slower off the mark.
Uh-huh.
So we took a couple of minutes to get organised and talked about mistakes we made on the last one. And we weren't going to make the same mistakes this time. So we delegated, everybody had their job. And we were doing our service involved in the frogs. And then Simon decided to leave and threw a bit of a spanner in the works. This design was unique. I think when the council came along, everybody just reacted really quickly to the change. And obviously there was no panic. We just thought, right, well, we've got structure halfway in there, we'll modify it.
Very good. Who's my other reporters?
A lot of similarities actually. It did start off a little bit slower. I think everybody sort of started to just get into it again like we did the first time. But then it was like, no, hang on, we've got a lead designer, so let's talk to him and get his opinion
Yep.
on how we're going to do it. And then the variation of having to change into a bridge, again, similar.
sorry.
But when he was able to come back in, he just got straight back into it again and became part of the team again. So there wasn't a lot of disruption from that point of view.
So,
We had a clear design from the start. I think we learned from the previous
mhm.
one. That was the start of it. Everyone was doing really well and everyone was doing different parts. So once we changed our lead filters, everyone was still doing their own thing, but there wasn't much communication at first. Once we got that happening and then we changed to the Chris, I think was doing better communication, was much better at Chris filters than we were at Tower.
Give yourselves a round of applause. Well done. Obviously, deliberate disruption by yours truly. Some of the themes that came out for me, I don't know why I've written the word spannered down. I think I meant spanner in the works. The quick reaction, the way that you adapted to what was going on. And the most important one, if you want to sum resilience up into a very short phrase, I would say it's no panic. Not don't panic. That's from Dad's Army. This is no panic. It's just this quiet... I was chatting with Matt Church at the Thought Leaders Business School last week when we had our immersion, and he was talking a lot about the importance of maintaining calm. Be calm in what you do. It goes a long way to help me. And when I look back to some of the more fractious episodes in my professional life and my personal life, I just think, well, if actually at that point, if I'd stayed calm, things might have turned out better. Or one where it's had a good resolution, I'll go, the reason it turned out well was because I stayed calm. Breathe in, breathe out, count to 10, stop, sit on your hands, keep your mouth shut until your brain's engaged. All of those expressions all mean the same thing. Staying calm. And that's the most important thing, I think, in resilience, is just staying calm, assessing what is going on, and then reacting appropriately. And you all did remarkably well. I had some flights of fancy about that. I was going to buy one of those megaphones with a siren on it and do all, but I managed to maintain my calmness when I was designing that. So I still have some other ideas for when I run it again. The most important thing, and we're coming to the close now because we're getting towards the end of our time. The most important thing is what I said earlier. You can't have a resilient organisation without resilient individuals. If you look at the obvious examples of resilient organisations, which are things like fire and rescue services, there are things like the military, aircraft carriers, and then the bigger organisations like Google, the one thing that they have in common is they train, and if you don't think you've trained enough, go and train some more, and if you think you've trained enough, well, go and train some more anyway. They keep their level of expertise in what they do up. They keep running. They're constantly refreshing, constantly asking, how can I do things better? What is it that I can do that will make things happen better next time? How can I actually improve on where I am? And that's the key thing. I think that the key word, and that's why I circled it here, in all of this is learning. And that's why I love environments like this. This is not because you've been sent along by your company. This is because you want to come in and you want to understand what's going on and you want to self-improve. So organisational resilience comes out of individual resilience. And that takes me back to that model. Now, I said to you earlier that if you wanted to get the character strengths questionnaire to me, I'd have a look at it. And one of the things that the VIA character strength can help me to do is to help me look at your resilience. So your homework is in the pack. I apologise for the quality of the copy that you've got. It's in there. That's the thing that says resilience, problem management, resource priming. You'll see it should be in there. If not, we'll make sure you get a copy. It's sort of a badly photocopied page. If not, we'll get you a copy of it. And basically that uses the outcome of the VIA survey. That uses that to actually come up with an idea about how you can be more resilient. I'll just go through it very quickly. So what you need to do is to look at an upcoming stressor that you know is coming on, a difficult situation that you know is coming, and then you need to handle it. You then think about your character strengths, and then think about how much you've used them in the past and how important they are to you. And then draw connections between your character strengths and the situation you are going into. So as I said earlier, you'll notice with me, I use humour a lot. Some of it works, some of it doesn't, some of it gets me into trouble, some of it gets me out of trouble. But I will normally resort to humour to try and diffuse tension if I know that there is a tense situation. Unless it's not appropriate, of course. But that's what I will do. So you then take action with your strengths during the situation. That's how you can use them to improve your resilience. So that's one of the things. This is not me, I'm not plugging here, I'm not selling. If you want to understand your mental toughness, your resilience more, and there are other people who can help you to do this as well. There is a test that was called MTQ48. It's just become MTQ Plus. It's marketed by a company out of the UK called AQR International, which took the work of Peter Clough and converted it into a commercial program. I have to charge to do that because they charge me. They won't let me do the questionnaire without charging it. But that explains. And the interpretation takes quite a bit of time to actually work through. And if you want to do that, then by all means, get in touch with me. That's all I've got to say. Thank you very much. There was a bus driver. We went to Milford Sound, and I remember thinking this was the time. He said, "Thank you very much. You've been the best. You've been the best audience since the last one." But seriously, thank you very much for your attention, and thank you for engaging in the game. You never know quite what response you're going to get with exercises like this, and you did engage, and it was fantastic. It's just something different to do, but it kind of illustrated the point that you're never too old for Lego. Is one of the things that comes about. As I say, if you want to have a look at the VIA survey, please just get in touch. I can give you a response to that. If you want to ask some more about MTQ, I can tell you what goes on there. I'll do my best to get back to you as quickly as I can, but if you all write to me and say, please do my VIA survey, it might take a couple of weeks before I can get back to you, so please be patient. It's been a great pleasure. As I said earlier, Steve's put a great group together here, and I've enjoyed chatting with those of you I've chatted with, and I wish you the very best going forward. Thanks, Steve.
Excellent. Big round of applause for Clive.